Thank you.
Okay, recording has started. So I'm going to use the conversation, at least the part that I got, and I may have this wrong exactly, but this Plexus project in the Commons may reflect some of those breaking down to those barriers that we've had, and some conversations I've had with people who want to be participants in this project. Since we don't have a lot of people on, I'd like to have, we all know Denise, and she's kind of going to be in and out. So if others could introduce themselves very briefly and what their level of interest is in this project, and then I'll bring you up to date on where we are.
Okay, I'm Nancy Dixon, and what Denise and I were talking about earlier was the group called Better Angels, which is a relatively new movement in the United States, and I've become a moderator for Better Angels groups that are trying to bring that divide together through conversation. So that's my interest.
Beautiful.
Well, I'm Madeline Blair, and I'm just sort of interested in basically everything that Plexus does, and so I'm here for that. But having already listened to Nancy talk about Better Angels and this political divide, that is of keen interest to me as well, because I feel that we really need something that will bring us back together as a nation.
Excellent. Excellent. Kirsten?
Hi, yeah, this is Kristen Von Donop. I'm a principal with a firm called Change Logic. The focus of my work is private sector, but I'm building a portfolio of clients in nonprofit and humanitarian work. And my interest in your project is to experience how digital platforms can enable diverse collaborators to come together and to solve really tough problems. Because I have a client in particular who's looking to. They have a vision to use platforms globally to connect communities who are solving similar challenges to eradicate poverty. And so when I saw what your project was about, I said, gosh, this has a lot of similar characteristics in terms of the multiple participants and the dynamic nature of the collaboration. So that's how I'm interested.
Excellent. I think you'll be satisfied. I think you'll get what you're looking for. Although I'm very cautious because sometimes there's so many solutions that are emerging out there for the kind of work that we're doing and the kind of work you're interested in, Kirsten, that you never know what you don't know. So you will find out the best that we know today at this point. And how we related to the current political divide and the Better Angels and start off this conversation is because between the initial presentation of the project and the asking of work contributions and ideas and interest from a variety of individuals and organizations in a very open kind of manner, and some subsequent conversations that we've had with people who have, and organizations who expressed interest, one of the things that really struck me was how, because this project is truly from a bottom up, it has the potential of allowing anyone with a web connection in the world to participate in the project, separate from their governmental setting, as long as they don't interfere with the web connections, and their individual situation. So it is not organized institutionally. And I think this is where some of the divide we have in this particular country, we have politically, because we give the institutions a certain bias of legitimacy that they don't always earn. And some of the conversations we've had around our Supreme Court nominee is about the default legitimacy that's given to certain gender senators and certain Supreme Court nominees, without really a lot of question, just that they should, because they're in that position, they have a legitimacy that others may not have. And the reason why this is important is because as I've talked to the people who have an interest in this project and who have signed on a little more quickly, they all have cautioned that we may consider avoiding, at least in the beginning, deep institutional buy-in. And the reason for this is that institutions bring with them a certain path that's already been created, and a certain a certain interest from the leaders of that organization to have the organization go in a certain manner. So at this point, and I think it's very interesting to me, that where we're getting the interest, now I'll bring up specific examples, and where we're getting the mild or non-interest is from organizations that are more institutionally based, that have an interest in our project, but they can't adapt easily. So how this relates to complexity science and complexity theory is that us on the call, let Kristen decide whether or not she's institutionally based, but us who are on this call that are not so institutionally based are a little freer to adapt to what seems to be the best methodology going forward. So just a very brief restatement of the intent of the project, and then I'll go into what has been accomplished between the initial call and this call, and what we may see going forward. My suggestions, I'm going to take all the suggestions from the field, of course. So the project is designed to make real actions in the environment that normally would have invisible consequences, make those consequences visible. So actions we take, how we get to work, the food we eat, the products we buy, inevitably have some kind of environmental impact. There's no way in which we can live without having an impact on the environment. This is, because we are from the environment, we emerge from the environment. So what we know about health is that if we use resources well and we get what we need with a minimization of resource use, that will create a better health both for us and for other humans in the world and either other life forms in the world. And so take, for example, electricity use. So we all are using electricity, of course, now, but we're getting it from a variety of sources, and we cannot see what the impact of those sources are. So our idea is to create an algorithm that's useful internationally to model what the impact of these different resources are on the environment. Typically, electrical companies and other environmentally motivated organizations try to feed back data to consumers to influence their behavior. But what we can do is we can calculate, we can come up with an algorithm that is, again, useful internationally, where we can see what the environmental impact is if you get your electricity from the burning of coal. We can see what the environmental impact is if you get it from solar or wind or natural gas, whatever it might be. And we can create a picture of that in a virtual environment. So while you can't actually see the carbon emissions that are created by the electricity you're using now, in this virtual environment, you would be able to see those emissions. And the goal of it is to help people to change their behavior by feeding back to them essentially the story of what their behavior is creating. Now, you can do this with a whole variety of impacts on the environment that we do each day. So if your breakfast was steak and eggs, say, you're going to have a much larger impact, detrimental impact on the environment because of the amount of land, water, resources, chemicals that are used to create that steak and those eggs, than if you had a whole grain cereal breakfast. it would have a larger impact. So we can create an algorithm about that even because it takes about the same amount of land, the same amount of grain to create either the cereal or create the cow, either here or in Cambodia or in Russia or in Germany or wherever. It'll take about the same amount of grain to grow a cow here as it does anywhere else. So we can model the restoration of the land in this virtual environment. And again, it is to allow you to see visually what is normally invisible to you in terms of what your impact is. And also, our goal is to create a digital currency similar to a Bitcoin, but unlike a Bitcoin, this digital currency would be earned. You would have to gain this currency through your good actions. So, for instance, I drove into work like a lot of people do in my car by myself that can hold 5 people. Okay, but if I was in a situation where I could take the subway, I might say be able to earn some coins by taking the subway versus the car. I might be able to earn some of these digital coins by installing solar panels versus depending entirely upon the electrical grid. So we create a virtual environment where you can see what the impact of the action is, and then you can earn this digital currency based upon that action. This would be possible both for individuals and for groups. For instance, you potentially could earn this currency and see the impact not only by your actions, but by facilitating the actions. If you were to organize potentially a carpool or to organize people to ride their bikes into work, you may gain through this platform some coins and see the impact of your efforts, not only on your individual efforts, but even maybe in your group efforts or your community efforts. All this data would be compiled to show what the impact was worldwide. So you could see what they were doing in India on this program. You could see what they were doing in Colombia, South America in this program and such. And our belief is that this would help drive good behavior. And going back to the institutional comment, or way we start with this, it does not require an institution to put in regulations or to force behavior, but this encourages good behavior based upon what people can see their impact is. And this is going to be, and Kristen would be interested in this particular thing, it's called a DAOstack web platform. It's what I call an evolved blockchain environment, where it is a software program that allows you to organize through a reputation system and a transaction system, secure, trustworthy collaboration. I'm not going to go any more into that, but that's the platform that we think we'll be using. Now, since the first phone call, we did get some interest from the DAOstack platform. Myself, Denise, and Bob had a conversation with an Eric Rodriguez. He was at a web development conference in Berlin. We had a conversation with him, and he has taken it back to what to their incubator group. They do have some monies to start new projects, and frankly, they are looking for projects that would take advantage of their web platform. And apparently, he's gotten some interest from this incubator group because he wants to have another call with us next week. So it looks like we made a big step in terms of securing potentially the web platform for this. I had a call on Monday with a gentleman from England who does some health organization work. His name is Chris Lahr. He has his own organization where he talks about complexity and system science related to healthcare administration. He is quite interested, and he is going to be working with us to create the sense of the valuing of this change in behavior, both individually and group. We have interest from Mr. Stormberg, who is the chairman of the International Society for Systems and Complexity Science and Health. They have a conference coming up April 4 to 5 in Knoxville, Tennessee, where they may feature this project in kind of a working session. And we also have some interest from an Alex Pazitatis, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that name. He's in Greece. He's on a 5-year grant from the University of Tallinn, working on a peer-to-peer commons project. He sees a lot of synergy between what we're doing and what he's doing, and he's going to be coming out with a paper, and he wants to highlight our project as as an example of the emergence of commons types activity that we're seeing across the world. So that's where we are at this point. And frankly, it's greater progress than what I anticipated, because we have some interest from the identified web platform, and we have a commitment for a face-to-face meeting, not a firm commitment, but a soft commitment for a face-to-face meeting in this country at an international complexity meeting. And we have a volunteer to lead the valuing portion of this. So I'm going to leave it now open to your input, your questions, and next steps forward. So unmute yourself and please jump right in.
I'll tell you what comes to mind immediately. Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
What comes to me immediately is Deming's admonition that, you know, you have to measure what you want to, you work to measurement. And this really gives a measurement to objectives. I like that a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my first thought as well, Madeline, was the idea that if you can make it visible, and that sounds like the main thing, if you can make it visible, then you can really help people, particularly their own group's behavior, then it's possible to think more clearly about it than just the abstract idea. So I think you've got a fantastic idea, the idea of making all of this visible to us.
Yeah, because the impacts, thank you, Nancy, the impacts are real, but we just cannot see them.
That's right. It also reminds me of the early feminist research that said, you know, we've been invisible. Now let us make ourselves visible again. So yes, visibility. Key.
Absolutely.
And you didn't say what the name, when you started, you didn't say what the name of the project was. What's the project called?
Well, we're calling it the Commons Project, but one of my ideas about one of the major things that needs to happen going forward, and again, this is only the second call, and this is a big project. I do not want to minimize the complexity, so to speak, of this project. One of the major things is to make some of those definitions, like create that public statement of what we're about, and even potentially creating the name beyond just the Commons Project.
Yeah.
Kristen?
I mean, the name works for me, and I think certainly a bias that I have is because my work is always with institutions, is that, you know, at some point, I can see the value of doing bottoms up and the importance of that freedom. But I would envision that at some point, the institutional drivers allow you to create sustainability, you know, to create something that's permanent. But that's a long way off. I mean, I recognize you're at the launch phase, so I'm really intrigued, and, you know, and I'm trying to envision though, like whose behavior are you trying to impact? children, adults? I mean, all the participants who are, all the different players. I mean, who's the target?
Well, the target is to create an environment that people with the Better Angels will recognize what they can do. We part of what we understand in health behavior is that we're very much impacted by our environment. I mean, one of the reasons why we have difficulty with weight management and chronic diseases in America is because our environment is an environment that actually creates that through large portions and low exercise and lots of conveniences and things like that, and not a culture of taking the bike to work, and not a culture of walking 3 miles to the train station to take the train into work, and those kinds of things. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to create an alternate environment that people can essentially play in and adapt their behavior to achieve the goals they want. And our belief is that as we get more and more people navigating to this environment, we'll have a greater impact on others. People will want to join in this effort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about it from the perspective of the different audiences? And I like Kristen's focus there on who are you targeting to, because one of the challenge, of course, is that you want to address the entire public. And I was thinking of a fabulous advertisement program in Sao Paulo, Brazil, when they were running out of water. Well, they're still running out of water, and they were trying to get people to reduce their usage of water. And it was comical things like ads that said, take a friend to the shower. But the other thought that occurs to me is I hope you're looking to the very long term, which means there should be an adaptation of this for children. Mm-hmm. Children really buy into this sort of thing very quickly.
Well, one of the advantages of this web platform is it allows people who participate in it to create their own groups, including groups for children. One of the areas I've not made progress in yet is connecting to other major continents like Africa and Asia and South America. If this truly is going to be a successful project, we need to connect with complexity science individuals, people who might have an interest and understanding of what we're trying to do, who work in this project, because to be successful, these interventions that people come up with will be very dependent upon and connected to what local resources are available. In my particular area directly, wind power would not be a real reliable go-to for electricity generation, but very likely hydroelectric or potentially solar power would be. So the advantage of the DAO stack, and DAO stands for Distributed Autonomous Organization, I should have said that, Distributed Autonomous Organization. The advantage of that is that you can organize locally. You don't have to organize based upon what other people are doing. I mean, that's some of the problem we saw when we had some difficulties with Peace Corps and other organizations who had very good intentions about helping people grow different crops in their country, and ended up creating more hunger and poverty because the crops weren't really adapted to their environment.
Right.
This program will allow the people to decide in their environment what is the best way to achieve these reductions in use of resources.
That is brilliant. I worked with the World Bank for many years, and there are many, many projects where they did precisely what you talked about, create more of a problem than what they were trying to solve.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is, I know I'm thinking very broadly, but you're going to have to give tools to those other cultures, so to speak, so
right.
that they can then take the black box that you're going to provide and put the front end on it for themselves. Yes?
Yes, and apparently there's a way to do that. So I am not a data person. I mean, a data computer programmer, coding person. But apparently there's a way to do this in this DAO stack. And the DAO stack people, even though they don't call themselves complexity science people, they're very much interested in that emergent, self-organized kind of process. So I cannot tell you what those pieces are, but apparently they exist. The DAO stack itself is not complete, but it has a lot of interest. I don't know if you've heard of Ethereum. Have you heard of it? It's, yeah, okay. This is even got people in the Ethereum environment excited, apparently. I'm not part of that call, but you can check that out.
And what is Ethereum or Ethereum? I'm not familiar with it.
Ethereum is a, geez, I'm going to tell you what you probably get better information from the web, but my impression is Ethereum is an enhanced blockchain. So blockchain came out originally in 2006, and it was just a way to create secure transactions, essentially. Uncorruptible transactions, and someone decided, oh, you could create a coin kind of transaction. They created Bitcoin based upon the blockchain, and Ethereum is an enhancement of that is a little bit more efficient than blockchain is, and DAO stack is an enhancement of all that. Did that answer the question?
It did. Thank you. Yeah, I was able to pull up Ethereum, and I can see that it's an open source platform. Great.
Right. But it's different than the DAO. The DAO stack is different than Ethereum and some of these others that use digital coins, because with the digital coins, and what I think is unique about our project is in the tradition in the terms of the last 10 years, you have to take a recognized government's sanctioned currency, whether it be pounds, euros, or dollars, and buy into those digital coins, where our coins will be earned by these reputable actions that are recorded in the blockchain in this DAO stack environment.
And then is there something you do with those coins, or is it just that you feel really proud that you have earned those coins?
You mean sort of like gold stars?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we'll have to see what emerges, but the potential is that if this is a coin that can be earned by anyone, including, say, a farmer in Bangladesh, as long as they have a web connection, then it could become a default coin.
They could actually become more wealthy than us based on their use of the environment.
Yes, and what's different about this versus other Bitcoins is that they've operated the same way most wealth schemes have, in that if you buy in early, you make the most money.
Yeah.
And in this case, you earn money even if you don't buy. You don't have to buy. You don't. My goal is that there's no way to buy in. Now, I'm not the leader of all this, and I'm going to be, this is just the concept, and the community will decide how it goes forward. But I would advocate that we don't sell these digital tokens, that they're only earned in some fashion.
I've been typing away here, and I just sort of wanted to jump in because I think what's so interesting about this is that it starts to transcend an assumed value. And the opportunity is, if you think about the fact that earning these tokens or coins, that you could have truly a collaborative, multi-governmental, multicultural assignment of what a coin means. So assuming that the United Nations said that, food and water distribution, that this would be a way for countries or communities to develop greater coins or value to be able to get some of the things, or sewing machines. I don't want it to be basic things, but sewing machines or cows or whatever the case may be. So that all of a sudden you can use this as a way in which to barter for behavior to assets, if that makes sense.
Correct. And you could even, as an individual, potentially invest your coins in a new power generation system that, as it was more efficient in using resources, you get a return of even more coins because you participate in this group project. The implications are unknowable, but that's what I'm thinking at this point.
Another thought that occurred to me, I'm going to be speaking at the Taos Institute conference in Cancun in November on the decolonialization of knowledge. And the basic discussion is going to be that after the Second World War, there was a massive colonialization of knowledge. Some people call it a democratization, but the point is there are many, many countries who became industrial because the West shared the technical knowledge. Well, that was great, except that now we're at a place where that there are other issues that are happening. And what I'm discovering as I think about this is that there's a vast amount of information now available. And yes, there is the issue of being able to get to it. But the other piece of this is that still the predominant knowledge is from the West. And how do we bring the knowledge that's coming from even indigenous people, how do we get that back into the larger system so that we decolonialize it? And what you're talking about is a way in which that knowledge can begin to enter back into the system.
Yes. So I mean, knowledge is also value. So my new friend Chris in Great Britain is, and if you want, I can connect you to him. If you want to work on the valuing aspect of this project, I'm sure he would appreciate some help.
I'm not sure I have the bandwidth for it right now.
He actually does it. He made me promise that he wouldn't have to work on it until the end of October.
Well, then, if you feel that would be useful, yes, you can certainly connect us.
Would you put a note into the chat?
I will.
With your information so that I can make that connection?
Yeah.
Denise, anything going on with the Bateson Institute and NORA?
Yes, I'm unmuting myself. So I just put in the chat, I wondered if anyone was familiar with or had relationships with the Bateson Institute. So I had reached out to Nora a while ago because I think some of the work that they are currently doing, and I put the link in the chat window, was very much aligned with some of the work that Plexus was doing. And during our call with the DAO staff folks, they have been in touch with Nora and the Bateson Institute because this is a way in which to do deeper research and look at shifting behavior across cultures, and also having it become more of a self-organizing project, if you may. And so it's interesting how those interconnections continue to emerge. So I had reached out and sent Nora the recording of our conversation, Mike, and she immediately said, "Oh my God, this is great, because we've been trying to find ways to connect and see if there were any opportunities, and this may indeed be one of them." So, which is really cool. And so Nora Bateson, for those of you who may not be familiar with her, is the daughter, the youngest daughter of Gregory Bateson. He's sort of the father of behavioral science. And the Bateson Institute has really started to, come onto the forefront for looking at some international initiatives. And they do have funding options, but more importantly, they have access to other large organizations and foundations. And that may be a really wonderful collaboration for us. So,
may I ask Kristen if she would share information about the group she's working with to decrease worldwide poverty? What kind of methodology do they have, and that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, they mostly have a vision right now. They have a vision of enabling interactions between communities. They call it a marketplace of ideas, so that if you, like, one example is there are girls in an African country that started their own. They created their own sanitary pad business, and so they. I mean, these were sex workers, so it was a way to get them off the street. They found an idea that they saw a need. They are working with local communities to develop and distribute, their product. And it's a really exciting example. And wouldn't it be great if a community of girls in Rio could just find out about that and adopt all the insight from it and just run with it? So that's their thinking, is that to take these innovations that are defined by the community for the community, but enable sharing across the globe. So I think it puts them in a very interesting place as the institution. When I talk to them about what is their role as the enabler of that platform, they're not there yet. And I think one of the things that we're running into is exactly what you described as the risk of institutional participants. And that is that they've been operating in the NGO space for 40 years, 50 years. They get their funding from DFID and USAID. They set the requirements for the project. They have all this technical expertise in their global headquarters, and then that gets distributed down to communities. So this vision they have, which is very exciting, they're struggling with, where do we get started? How do we get started? And so I've been encouraging them to look at, how can we create an instance of, what does this platform need to be for people to share? If all they need is a web connection, then, there's got to be a way, but we're a long way off, I would say. Like I said, they have a vision, but I think they're also biting off a lot of exciting projects like, social impact investing, right? So getting people to invest in renewable energy in Myanmar, for example, and I would say that where they are is they're kind of operating in a space that we would call incremental innovation as opposed to disruptive innovation. And I think what you're doing with the Commons Project is on the disruptive end. You're really trying to connect new users with new products and services, whereas these guys are trying to innovate with what they're currently doing, which is good, but it's a far way off from their vision. I hope that was clear.
Oh, it is. Now, this DAOstack does have the capacity. It's a web platform, so it's we're not going to. Our project is not going to capture it, and they could create their own community of sharing, knowledge sharing on the DAOstack platform, but they'd have to contact DAOstack themselves.
One of the things that I think is so exciting about all of these things that we're talking about is that as governments, and like the World Bank, as Madeline mentioned, is a government organization, that as governments decrease their interest in helping, in a sense, and I think that certainly happened in the United States. The government in the last few years has helped a great deal less. That it does sound like that there are individuals and small organizations that are taking hold of trying to fix things, not relying on the government, not relying on organizations, but there seems to be a growing willingness from the grassroots to help and to make things better. I don't know if that's just me and my optimism trying to look at that, but do others see that something like that that's happening?
I think so. I mean, I think what we're seeing with this particular client is that there's a lot of distrust because of the role that governments have played in the past, and so these the communities that they serve are less and less interested in the mandates or the requirements as defined in the U.S. or the UK. I don't know how it's impacting their local government, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah. Well, I'm particularly, because I'm connected to this Better Angels group, which came up in response to this huge cultural divide in the United States. And the government clearly has no way to solve that, and organizations don't have any way to solve that. But it is possible, if enough people get involved, that they can at least reduce the divide. They can at least cause people to listen to each other, and that, and it seems to me there are a number of organizations like that that are coming up, that are raising their heads and saying, maybe we can help this in some way, maybe help make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that these conversations point to the fact that we're moving away from a authoritative, institution-driven method of organizing human action to more distributed method of organizing human action that is also not dependent upon a single gender, but is participated by all.
Yeah. That's. I think that you said it very well. Say it again, because I liked exactly what you said. We're moving away from this authoritarian.
We're moving away from top-down authoritarian institution kind of model, which has historically, obviously been male-based, to a distributed reputation-based authority that is not confined to one particular gender. Because one of the issues, as Kirsten talked about, what I've heard is institutions get into a project and it's called project capture. All of a sudden the project is totally swallowed up by the institution. And one of the difficulties I've seen in working with institutions, even NGOs, is that often it's dominated by a leadership that's more worried about their particular reputation rather than even the organizational reputation. I mean, I've seen this in a number of nonprofits and NGOs, and certainly, of course, for-profit companies, that the reputation of the company is the reputation of the leadership. And I think we're moving more towards an authority kind of system that's based upon each individual's reputation, based upon their actions on a day-to-day basis, versus their position of authority within an institution.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, that comes from me reading feminist literature.
Yeah.
which I had to find from a women's studies professor locally. I couldn't find it myself.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting to me is looking at how movements occur. I mean, we have models from the past that talk about how things change. But I've been thinking lately a lot about vegetarianism or veganism and how that spreads. And it's spread in the United States quite amazingly now. Even this idea now that I think a lot of people have adopted on Meatless Monday, for example. And even I see some organizations now that have in their cafeteria, they have Meatless Monday and so forth. But that's certainly been a person at a time, hasn't it? The idea of vegetarianism. has moved, you know, and I can think in my family, my granddaughter, who lives with me, has gotten very interested in being a vegetarian, and just through the power of her own influence, she's really caused me to move in that direction. And she's having a harder time with her father, but we all seem to be moving in that direction. But that's a person at a time kind of phenomenon, I think.
But see, I think that goes back to the institution and authority kind of question, because in my area locally, we have physicians for responsible medicine. They're a vegan pushing organization led by Dr. Neil Bernard. And having worked with that organization, it is so dependent upon the personality and the authority of that particular physician. And I found it difficult to work with the group, because if your way of promoting vegetarian diet did not fit with his idea, then there was no collaboration. So I think that this project is different. It is, as Kristen said, disruptive more, because it doesn't depend upon the institutions, which do tend to do it one person at a time versus collectively. I do want to pay attention to the time. We have about another 7 minutes. So there are a number of different things that, if you wish to be involved in, please let me know. You can let me know directly through Plexus, or I can put my email in. One of the things we need to do is we need to craft a message, probably a message maybe in a number of different mediums about what the project is, that 5-minute elevator kind of speech, so that we can share that with people we come across. And there's the valuing process that's going on. Another process that we could start thinking about is we could start thinking about what impact would be most easily visualized. So we wouldn't create everything at the same time. Would that be the reduction in the eating of meat? Would that be reduction in emissions from transportation, reduction in emissions from electricity generation? What would that be? And starting to examine, based upon the literature, coming up with a proposed algorithm of how to convert individual action into environmental impact. So I am going to go ahead and put my email address in. I'm available through Plexus also, and I do not want to be the king of this project. So yeah, you can even say, what I want to do is I want to co-lead or whatever this thing. I want to be there for every step. You can say whatever you want to say. So who is interested in next steps?
Well, I already have one, so
Natalie.
any more.
Okay, very good. So I will connect you with Chris next month.
Yeah, and I'm going to explore with the Taos Institute to see if they would have any interest in joining or partnering with you on the Commons project.
Excellent.
And I'd be glad to help us as well, Mike. I don't know quite how it could be helpful, but I certainly have an interest.
I'm going to leave that to your. I don't want to direct you. So maybe it is with the writing of the statement. Maybe gathering journal articles on electric generation, or just contemplating how it might be visualized.
Okay.
But let me know. It's all open at this point. It's totally open. Denise, how are you?
Hi, I just put my video on. I clearly want to be involved in this. So there's two ways. I mean, in addition to making sure that I keep all of the avenues open for people to get involved as the project starts to emerge, specifically, I would be happy to work on the crafting of the message, which I think directly relates to that outreach.
Right.
And the other thing that it just dawned on me, and I think I'm channeling our dear friend Lisa a bit, is I just keep thinking that there's an opportunity, if we can find the appropriate funding or support, to potentially have, a meeting of a lot of different groups and people, if as we get further along, sort of an innovation idea hackathon lab, because to some extent, so many of these connections will start to really sort of coalesce and emerge if we're all in the same room or all connected in some way, specifically around the DAO stack and different institutes and specific clients, research projects, the ability to beta test things. So that may be something, Mike, that will allow us to get greater participation in a quick way. So I have to think about that.
The last thing that we need to do, but I can stay on for a few minutes after, is we need to contemplate what is our platform for collaboration and sharing, because we can't use the DAO stack.
Oh, no.
Yeah, at this point, Google Documents, Telegraph, email, Slack. Some of these I'm not familiar with their benefits and their limitations. So I'm open to suggestions about that.
In the meantime, Mike, I would like you to check the spelling of your email address. It may be correct, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
It's my name with RN at the end.
But your name is Taylor, not Taylor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we have clearly the opportunity to, we can set up a Google Doc option. And I think that's good. And this space on Zoom is available at any time. It's a room that's been set up for the group. So that's a possibility. And then if we think that, setting up a Slack environment for messaging or other things is something that we can certainly pursue if somebody has an interest in that. We can set that up pretty easily.
Okay. Excellent. I appreciate the energy and the enthusiasm. What's most remarkable to me is that this idea seems to make sense to people, and that gives me a lot of hope that it's going to go forward. Once people hear the idea, it goes, oh yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I'm really excited to have had a chance to learn from you on this call, and from all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard about the Commons Project for a long time, Mike, and this is the first time I really have begun to understand it.
Thank you. It's okay. Probably Denise and I will be crafting the message.
Great.
At this point.
Absolutely. And I'll post this on, and I make sure everyone gets it, but we have a page on the Plexus site for the Commons Project, and we now have a YouTube channel for the Commons Project. So we'll be recording, any of these meetings so people can come in and listen and, share things. And so hopefully we'll start to be building a repository of resources and information. And if we can get Slack up and running, we could even have that be connected to the page on Plexus.
Nice.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.